At exactly 06:35 hours local time, commercial satellites passing over the Taiwan Strait detected something that immediately triggered emergency monitoring protocols inside the Pentagon. More than 70 Chinese naval vessels were maneuvering simultaneously into coordinated positions surrounding Taiwan from the north, south, and east. Within minutes, Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense confirmed the unthinkable. The People's Liberation Army had initiated one of the largest encirclement exercises ever conducted around the island. But this was not a normal military drill, because for the first time, Chinese forces were openly rehearsing what analysts describe as a joint blockade operation, a full-spectrum strategy designed to isolate Taiwan from the outside world without launching an immediate amphibious invasion. And then the situation escalated even further. At 0712 hours, Taiwanese radar stations detected waves of PLA Air Force aircraft crossing the median line simultaneously, while Chinese H-6K strategic bombers armed with anti-ship cruise missiles moved toward the Philippine Sea. At the same time, multiple Chinese Coast Guard cutters began operating near major Taiwanese shipping corridors, while cyber attacks targeted financial and communications infrastructure on the island. The blockade rehearsal had already begun. Inside Taiwan's underground command centers, emergency combat readiness protocols activated across all military branches. Anti-ship missile batteries moved into firing positions. Mobile radar systems dispersed into hardened mountain shelters. Taiwanese F-16V fighters scrambled from hidden air bases as Patriot air defense crews locked onto incoming aerial contacts. Then came the message from Beijing. Chinese state media announced that the exercise was intended to punish what it called dangerous separatist activity and to demonstrate China's ability to completely cut Taiwan off from external military support during wartime. The meaning was unmistakable. This was no longer symbolic intimidation. China was rehearsing isolation warfare, and Washington immediately understood the implications. At 0745 hours, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command ordered the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group to reposition west of Guam, while American P-8A Poseidon surveillance aircraft surged into the Philippine Sea to monitor Chinese naval movements in real time. The Pacific was suddenly shifting toward its most dangerous moment in years. To understand why this operation terrified military planners across the world, you need to understand the strategic transformation currently taking place inside the Chinese military. For decades, analysts focused primarily on the possibility of a direct amphibious invasion of Taiwan, a massive D-Day-style assault involving thousands of troops crossing the strait. But modern Chinese doctrine is evolving. Instead of immediate invasion, Beijing increasingly appears focused on strangulation tactics. Blockade first, isolation second, pressure third, and only then, if necessary, invasion. This strategy changes everything. Taiwan imports nearly all of its energy and much of its food supply through maritime shipping lanes. Its economy depends on uninterrupted trade routes connecting it to Japan, South Korea, Southeast Asia, and the wider global market. Even a temporary disruption could create enormous economic and political shockwaves, and China knows it. At approximately 0810 hours, satellite imagery revealed several Chinese Type 055 destroyers moving into positions east of Taiwan, a highly significant development because it demonstrated PLA Navy capability to operate beyond the first island chain while threatening reinforcement routes from the Pacific side. This matters enormously. Historically, Taiwan's eastern coastline was considered relatively safer due to the natural barrier created by the island itself, but modern Chinese naval aviation, long-range missiles, and expanding blue water naval capabilities are changing that calculation rapidly. At the same time, Chinese DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missile brigades reportedly entered heightened readiness conditions along the mainland coast. These are the so-called carrier killer systems designed specifically to threaten U.S. aircraft carriers operating in the Western Pacific. And suddenly, the battlefield became much larger than Taiwan alone. Because this crisis is ultimately about one terrifying question. Can the United States still project military power inside China's expanding missile envelope? That question now dominates every Pentagon war game. At 0832 hours, Taiwanese military radar detected multiple drone formations approaching offshore defensive sectors near the Penghu Islands. Analysts believe the PLA was rehearsing ISR saturation tactics, using large numbers of reconnaissance drones to overload Taiwan's detection networks while mapping radar frequencies and response times. This is modern warfare evolving in real time. No side wants to fire the first missile, but every side is already preparing the battlefield. Electronic warfare units activated across the region. Cyber probes intensified against communications infrastructure. Surveillance aircraft crowded the skies while submarines maneuvered silently beneath the waves. And then, another escalation occurred. At 0855 hours, Japan announced that its self-defense forces had deployed additional fighter patrols near Okinawa, while Japanese Aegis destroyers increased missile defense readiness. Tokyo understands that any Taiwan conflict would almost certainly spill directly into Japanese operational zones. The entire Pacific Alliance system was beginning to activate. Meanwhile, Chinese social media exploded with nationalist messaging as footage emerged of PLA rocket force convoys moving through coastal provinces. Videos showed transporter erector launchers carrying ballistic missiles, while military commentators openly discussed closing the steel ring around Taiwan. Psychological pressure was becoming part of the operation itself, and Taiwan faced an enormous dilemma. Respond too aggressively, and Beijing could accuse Taipei of provocation. Respond too weakly, and China normalizes military encirclement as a permanent reality. This is exactly the gray zone strategy China prefers. Operate below the threshold of open war, while steadily shifting strategic conditions over time. At 0917 hours, U.S. intelligence. Assets reportedly detected unusual Chinese submarine activity east of Taiwan. Multiple PLA Navy submarines may have moved into interception positions designed to complicate potential American naval intervention routes. If true, that represents a major escalation in operational sophistication, because China is no longer simply demonstrating coastal defense capability. It is rehearsing layered regional denial warfare across air, sea, cyber, and space domains simultaneously. And that is what terrifies Western planners most. The PLA does not necessarily need to defeat the United States outright. It only needs to make intervention costly enough, risky enough, and uncertain enough that political hesitation begins to emerge inside Washington itself. That is the real strategic objective. Delay intervention, fragment alliance coordination, control escalation tempo, and dominate the opening phase before reinforcements arrive. At 0940 hours, Taiwan's Ministry of Defense announced that 48 Chinese aircraft and dozens of naval vessels remained active around the island, while electronic interference continued affecting portions of regional communications traffic. No missiles had been fired, no ships had been sunk, no invasion had begun. Yet the region was already operating under wartime conditions psychologically. This is the new face of 21st century deterrence warfare. Not constant peace, not total war, but permanent high-pressure confrontation. Tonight, Chinese warships continue maneuvering around Taiwan. American reconnaissance aircraft remain airborne across the Pacific. Japanese and Taiwanese fighter crews stay on combat alert while satellites overhead monitor every movement in the Taiwan Strait. And somewhere beneath the surface of the ocean, attack submarines from multiple nations are now shadowing each other in silence. Because every military planner understands the terrifying truth behind this crisis. If a real blockade ever begins, the world economy itself could be thrown into chaos within days. Nearly half of global container shipping passes through nearby waters. Semiconductor supply chains critical to the entire modern technological world depend heavily on Taiwan's stability. This is no longer just a regional dispute. It is a pressure point capable of shaking the entire international system. And the most dangerous part is this. Every new exercise makes the next one easier to normalize. Every encirclement operation teaches valuable operational lessons. Every response reveals new intelligence. The battlefield is being rehearsed repeatedly in plain sight. The question is no longer whether China can surround Taiwan temporarily. The question now terrifying strategists worldwide is this. At what point does a military exercise stop being a drill and become the real operation?